I like your braids.
My braids? Thank you. I had them done in town.
Hi.
Oh, and then I need to get my study material up too. Sounds like somebody's on top of there.
Hi guys.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Oh shoot! I'm sorry. Oh,
What was that?
Sorry. I'm so sorry. It's Africa for you, man. I have this sunlight. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have this sunlight thing in my office and like window, and there was this huge bird. Like I thought it was like what is it? A swan, a duck?
It is a duck.
It looked like a duck, but and like you can hear it, and I was like, is there somebody on the roof? And then she was like, no, it's a bird. And then we see this huge animal. All right. So thanks everybody for joining. Sorry I'm a bit late. It's a long story. It's like a little bit of drama, but anyway, I'm here, and we have Angelo here, and we are ready to get started. We're ready to start season 2 of our study session. Season 1 went so well. We learned so much. There were a couple of us who took our WSET Level 2 and we passed. And so I was like 2 points away from distinction. I got merit, so I'm gonna go for distinction this time, all right? So that's the goal. And it's gonna be a long journey. So this study session is intended to end on November 14th, but then after that, there's still some self-study that you guys need to do and some review, and anything in between. But right now, we are going to get started. I want to introduce you guys to Angelo van Dyk. I hope I said his name right. You guys know I'm always messing up people's names. But he's originally from South Africa. He's living in the UK, and he's a certified advanced somm. He also has his own wine label. And I think this is right, but he's also started this group to help diversity in wine in general overall. And he'll tell us all about that, but he saw what we were doing and he reached out and he wanted to help, and so that's where we are right now. So he's here to help, he's here to guide us, he's here to mentor us, he's here to help us with our education journey. So welcome so much, Angelo. We are happy to have you.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to get started by just like introducing yourself first, and then we can like start off after that, we can kick off some studying.
100%, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to chat to you guys. I really hope that I can impart a little bit of knowledge. But yeah, I mean, if you guys have any questions as I'm bumbling through my intro, please feel free to stop me and fire away. So yeah, I mean, I'll kind of give my little story in a nutshell. I'm originally from South Africa. I am now living in London and have been out here for the past 6 years now. When I moved over, I had completed my WSET levels 2 and 3. Which I did in South Africa, and when I got to London, I then signed up to do my level 4 or the diploma. So that I tackled over a year and a half, and after the completion of that, I actually traveled to Northern California and spent 2.5 months out in Sonoma and worked to harvest with what was then called Wind Gap Wines with Pax Maley. It's now called Pax Wines. And did a fantastic harvest season out there. And that's kind of where the seed was planted to kind of tackle my own wine production. So in 2018, I went back to South Africa and I started making wine under a label called Yo El Rey. It's basically kind of produced in a negociant style. So I don't own any vineyard space, but just rent some cellar space in Stellenbosch, buy fruit from a couple of different farmers, and then produce at this facility there. And yeah, I mean, the 2018, the production is minuscule. Literally, I produced 1,700 bottles. So at this point, it's kind of somewhere between a passion project and starting to get a bit more momentum. But I've obviously found that, you know, I've got a really awesome sort of base now from which I work, having done something like the WSET Diploma, as well as the winemaking aspect of it. My full-time employment in London is with a company called Bedales. I work as their group wine manager. So I guess that takes on a bit more of a kind of administrative role. There's quite a bit of wine buying involved. There's the sommelier aspect to it as well. So yeah, that's kind of my journey. What kind of brought me here was that with the Black Lives Matter movement really kind of gaining momentum, and, you know, just forcing all of us to start asking some real questions and looking in the mirror and asking, you know, what are we doing? There was a incredible group that was put together here in the UK called Drinklusive, that was founded by a woman up in Glasgow, Susan. And Susan just really kind of sparked the conversation and really sort of shone a light on just how, yeah, the diversity just sucks. And it's something that is just like not addressed and is completely overlooked. And the silence, at least here in the UK, was ghastly. And so I guess the real sort of impetus for putting that group together was to really start kind of bringing about some change. And there have been some very, very, very cool people that have put up their hands in the past couple of days that are super excited to get involved with Blacc, and yeah, kind of step in for some guest lecturers. There's an awesome MW by the name of Dawn Davies, who I think will be getting involved at some point as well. But yeah, that's kind of my story. And like I say, I'll be happy to help out with whatever questions you have, or hopefully I have the answers. But fire away. Oh, mute.
I absolutely love your story, and I love it because it just shows you like this wine industry is so vast, right? Like you could start off thinking that you're going to do one thing, and then you can find your passion in another, and then you can do that while you're still doing that other thing, and then you can switch to something else. And so I think that having people like you on the show just shows people of good examples of like what you can do with this wine education that you study so hard for, and like the sky is really the limit. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Before we get started, so like today I was just thinking that, you know, we can make it a little bit of an informal session, but I did want to cover, I wanted you to talk to us about some tips for deductive tasting. We've been practicing on our own a lot lately, but if there's any tips, if you can just tell us like what your strategy is for deductive tasting, or if there's anything that you've noticed works for people in the past, you can share that with us. And then also your tips for just studying in general. Like as we embark on this 14-week process, like what are some of the things that we should be doing in between our sessions? And then if we have enough time, just give us some tips on wine pairing and some tips on like wine storage, just some general tips about wine pairing and some general tips about wine storage if we still have enough time. But before we get started with all that, let's just take a couple of questions. So like if you have some questions about Angelo's like wine journey, how he got from point A to point B, or if you have some questions about Drinklusive, let's talk about that right now. So let me see. If you have any questions, just unmute yourself or just raise your hand, and then we can ask those questions. And if not, we can just jump right into deductive tasting tips. So any questions before we get started? And if you don't have any right now, that's fine, because we're going to have them for at least 1 hour. So if they come to you while he's talking, please just, you know, jot them down, and then we'll ask them after each section he talks about. All right, so no questions, right? And if you have a question, if you don't want to like ask the question, you can always put it in the chat, and then I can ask the question on your behalf. All right, so let's get started. And Angelo, do you have any questions about us?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. Could you give me like just like a very brief little intro as to like where it started and kind of like what the vision is and moving forward?
Yeah.
As in Blacc as an organization?
Yeah, I will do that, and then I'll just give everybody a brief chance to introduce themselves so you know who the audience is, because the people that are on the
Fantastic.
call right now are pretty much our regulars. They're pretty much the people. Sometimes we have like 8 people on the call, sometimes we have 20 people on the call, but the people
Great.
right now are pretty much the regulars. So Blacc started in 2016. I just joined Blacc in 2018. I'm an American transplant, and when I first joined Blacc, I fell in love with the concept. I fell in love with the people, and basically from the conversations that I had and from what I know, it was started by a group of Psalms already. They were Psalms working in the business, and they wanted a way to kind of give back and to share their knowledge with other people that were working in the business. And maybe they weren't Psalms, or maybe they were just starting out, but they wanted a platform so that they could mentor those people and people who were not working as Psalms but wanted to come into the industry. So that was one of the initial reasons that they started Blacc. And it was started by Greg Matambo, Tinashe, Aubrey, and then Ian. Those were some of the founding members. And so then as it kind of went on, it started to morph into these, my favorite thing was Black Mondays, where we partner with different wine farms, and we go out to the wine farm on Monday and we get firsthand experience from the winemakers, what it was like, you know, tasting notes, what it was like to make wine. We actually like spend the day with them and have lunch at the farm. And then also what they did last year in 2019, they had Blacc Fest, which was a wine festival, and they did it in the township, which was pretty awesome because as Blacc moved on, one of their missions became to introduce wine to underserved communities. And when I say underserved communities, I don't necessarily mean impoverished communities, because the Black middle class in all of Africa is growing and they're spending money on wine. So Blacc's mission also is to introduce fine wine to them and to introduce a wine culture to them. So that's why they started Blacc Fest, and they did it in the township, which was pretty unique. And they have all these different wineries come out. So that's what Blacc is. And then in 2020, when I was studying for my WSET, I felt like, you know what, I needed support, and I know there's other people that need support that are in Blacc. So I kind of just put a message out there: who wants to get together, who wants to study at my apartment. And some people came by my apartment, we started to study, and then COVID happened, and I was like, okay, well, I don't want to stop the studying, let's do this online. So we started doing it online. And then after we went through the entire WSET book, I said, well, how can I keep it fresh? So then I started calling it a master class, where I would invite winemakers, vineyard managers, sommeliers, anybody who was in the wine industry to come onto the platform and to talk to us and to share their knowledge. So that was season 1. So season 2, we're going to focus on WSET Level 3, and we're still inviting people. So in a nutshell, that's Blacc.
Fantastic. Yeah. Amazing. Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
So let's start with, I'm going to start with people who are on my screen. So I'm going to start with Monica. Monica, do you want to share your story, introduce yourself? Just tell us a little bit about your wine knowledge and how you found out about Blacc, or what you do in Blacc, or anything like that about Blacc.
Okay, awesome. So my name is Monica. I'm from the US. I am on an extended visit due to COVID-19. I was supposed to leave the country after spending 30 days in March. So I was supposed to leave in beginning, I guess it was May, really. But anyway, I found out about Blacc from my friendship with Tuanni. She is my wine godmother. And I am so grateful for the introduction, because I've met so many amazing people, and I'm hoping to get more involved as my journey from consumer to maybe, I don't want to be a wine professional. However, I do want to know more about wine, because I consume large quantities.
Very cool. All right, thanks, Monica. Okay, so now let's talk to Don. Don, can you tell us who you are, like how you got involved in Blacc, and what you do in the wine industry? We can't hear you. So the headphone issues again? Should we come back to you? I'll come back to you. All right, so let's go to Takara, because Takara's right next to you on my screen. Hey, Takara.
Hi, hope everyone is well. Good to see you all again. My name's Sakura. I'm former sommelier, currently a chef and hotel operator in Zimbabwe. Hoping to expand wine education in Zimbabwe, and also dust off some of that rust, because I did my WSET Level 3 in 2004. So it's quite a while back. So yeah, just really looking forward to having more fellowship with other wine drinkers and wine lovers. And also always learning. I'm a bit of a geek, so I enjoy learning about wine.
Nice. Wellington. Hey, Wellington. I can't see you, but you might be, okay. You're not muted anymore.
Can you see me?
We can't
Can
see
you hear
you.
me?
We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can't hear you. I think
Okay,
I don't know
well,
what's happening. It comes on and off like this.
okay,
Too
well,
much
we'll,
breaking. I can't hear much
we'll
of
come
what
back.
you're saying. I actually miss a lot of.
We'll come back to you, Wellington. That's quite all right. We'll definitely come back to you. Let's go to Palisa. Palisa, I know I probably said your name wrong, but can you help me out and tell me? Palisa.
Hey, Tuanni. Yes, it's Palisa.
Oh, I said it right. Okay.
Close enough. Sorry, everyone. I can't put my video on for some reason. I think my app hasn't updated or something. But anyway, just a quick intro from me. I am Palisa, and I am a co-founder of a platform called Wineish. And this is a sort of educational platform that we've created for young, fresh wine lovers from South Africa, and we put out educational content. We do wine tours and wine experiences with all sort of different kinds of wine brands, just to spread the love and to educate people about wine and debunk it as much as we can.
Love it. Yes, they have an Instagram called Wineish. You guys should check it out because they do a lot of fun stuff on their Instagram. Leonie, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good evening. I recently qualified as a sommelier, so I haven't had the opportunity to work yet. I saw your page on Facebook, so I joined because it's an opportunity to meet new people and also learn all about wine, since wine is a passion of mine as well.
Nice. And what was your certification in? Like, was it WSET, Cape Wine Academy?
No, it's I'm not too sure if you're familiar with Sommelier Academy.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes,
Very
it's from them.
That's with they're in Stellenbosch, right?
Vincent, yes.
Yeah. I know exactly who you're talking about. Very cool. Dawn, can we come back to you now?
I think I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. You're all good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right. My name is Dawn. I am living in the US currently, but I am from Zimbabwe. My wine sort of love rose when I was working on a cruise ship before, and I got introduced to wine then. And then I just want to learn more about it. You know, I've done my WSET Level 1, and I did pass with a merit, but I didn't go as far as a distinction. Hoping to do my Level 2 soon, obviously, once everything is back to normal. And then, you know, I'm saving some money to open up like a little wine shop, and then just, you know, introduce my wine to more Black folks. Yeah.
We love it. I love it. That's my same mission too. More Black people drinking wine. Wellington, can you hear us now, or can we hear you now? You have to unmute yourself though.
All right. So, yeah, my name is Wellington. I can't see myself now. Okay. Wellington, and I'm from South Africa. I'm from Zimbabwe originally, but I've been in South Africa for quite a while. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I've done WSET and I'm writing my Level 3, basically. But my drive is more of entrepreneurship in terms of development and growth of Black brands, development of young entrepreneurs. My vision is to see young people having worked in the hospitality industry in South Africa and worked with some of the top restaurants, top wine boutique shops, and finally, I also opened my own wine shop, Wine Unlimited, which is in Joburg, franchising soon to Cape Town, which is quite a boutique wine shop doing amazing things in terms of testing, rare wines, sourcing wines, and a little bit of traveling. I love traveling. I love showcasing especially South African wines to the world, which is one of my drive. And yes, the Blacc platform is really a wonderful platform to see the young people and to interact and be able to share the knowledge. Knowledge from each and every one of you will aid ultimate value beyond compare. So yes, it's such a pleasure to be here and to with you guys and to learn, you know what I mean?
Okay, so yes, we do know exactly what you mean. I'm going to have to visit your wine shop when I visit Joburg. All right, so thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. I'm still happy that we're all have the same mission and the same journey. So let's get started. Angelo, do you have any tips for us for deductive tasting? So basically what we do is we take the WSET Level 3 grid, and when we do our deductive tasting, we just pretty much follow that grid. I can tell you a couple things that we don't really focus on is determining the youthfulness or the readiness of the wine. So that's something that it's probably my fault that we've kind of hummed over a little bit.
Sure.
But I don't know how important that is and if we need to revisit our group and focus on that. But yeah, just give us some tips.
For sure. So yeah, I made a couple of notes before I went into this because equally, I studied this the WSET Diploma. I graduated in 2016, so it's also I had to kind of like dust off the notes and dig back into it. Yeah, so kind of made a few notes in terms of the tastings and what they sort of expect in terms of theory. I think the big thing to realize with all of these qualifications is that there's a very specific way that they want you to answer the questions, and it sounds kind of counterintuitive because I think yes, you need to understand all of the content holistically, but there very much is a kind of a formula that once you kind of figure out what it is that they're looking for and how they want it presented, it's a pretty easy process moving through all of that, particularly when it comes to the tasting. So the tasting, I know they call it the systematic approach to wine tasting at the WSET, but it is very much that. And I think one of the big things to know is that whatever is present on that tasting sheet, so whatever they are expecting you to comment on, it is vital that every single one of those points are mentioned in your tasting notes, because everyone carries a mark, and if you leave one out, like some of the marks are so easy, like literally people forget to comment on the fact that it is a clear, you know, wine that isn't faulty, but that's a mark, right? It's something as simple as that is already ticks that you can get moving through. The further along you go, it obviously gets a little more in depth when they're talking about flavor characteristics, and that you get to unpack and maybe use a little more sort of poetic license. But I think it's super, super important to remember that everything that is listed on that sheet, you need to mention in some shape or form in your tasting notes. 100%. I find the tasting components in the exams, the best thing you can possibly do is actually, before you sit down, is kind of time yourself doing your tastings, right? When you're at home, yes, you can sit and you can mull over and you can smell and you can go back to the wine. But what I found was the hardest thing to wrap my head around is the fact that the clock's ticking. And I think the real skill is that when you learn how to taste under like kind of under pressure, and you learn to go with your gut on your first gut feel on what you smell and taste and experience, that's when you really can kind of move through tasting without anxiety, without having to kind of go back and smell and taste again. I found one of the biggest mistakes I made when I first started doing the diploma, which is perhaps a little more complicated, but in my tasting, I would kind of rush through and then go back and retaste everything again, which I think is important. But I found myself double guessing the whole time and kind of flip-flopping between the information. And I think that for me was often where I tripped up, is that I would have the right answer down in the first place, but then in going back and panicking and suddenly trying to kind of reassess and smell again, and then I would change it to a different wine or a different region, and that's where I often tripped up. So I think learning to kind of taste within those time constraints, super important, and going with your gut on whatever that first thing you smell and taste and experience is often actually the right call at the end of the day. What else? I think it's obviously it's an obvious point, but I think tasting as much as you can, as often as possible, because I was obviously very fortunate enough to be working in wine shops, in wine bars, where there was a constant flow of open bottles, but actually tasting intentionally, like tasting and making mental notes of what it is that you're experiencing, looking at the label, okay, this is Chablis from this year and it tastes and smells like X, Y, and Z, and constantly making little mental snapshots. Because I mean, I had such a luck, but in my diploma exam, like literally a couple of days before, we had sat down and tasted a German Spätburgunder, which is it's Pinot Noir. It is a little more unique. I think you can sort of pick it out in a lineup. If you had it alongside Burgundy and Central Otago, you could probably pick it out in the crowd. But in that exam, a German Spätburgunder came up, and it was like it was literally as if I was tasting the same wine from a couple of days ago. And sure, that's a bit of luck, but if I hadn't been really sort of going out of my way to be tasting at least one wine a day, it's I think I might not have stumbled upon that and had the opportunity to really kind of pin it down in the tasting. I can't remember in the WSET level 3, do you have to go as far as naming kind of variety and region? No.
That's only diploma level. I mean, you get extra points if you name those things, but you don't have to name those things. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, you don't have to name the region. I think you do have to name the varietal though. But you don't have to name the region. You get extra points for the region, and you get extra points for the vintage. So the varietal, yes. The region and the vintage, no.
Okay, understood. Oh, cool. And yeah, I think two more points that I made here in terms of the tasting component. The first one is that I think it's very, very, very important to calibrate your palate with someone that has had the WSET, kind of written the WSET diploma or level 3 or an MW, someone that really, because what I think medium acidity might be and what you think medium acidity might be, it's a completely subjective exercise, which I find very frustrating, because there's suddenly a right and a wrong when what I experience and you experience is totally different. But the bottom line is that there's obviously a benchmark, and I think it's learning what that benchmark is, so that when you taste or feel high alcohol or low acid, that there is a calibration point in your mind as to what they are going to be expecting as the examiners, right?
Yeah. One thing, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Please, no.
So in the deductive tasting, and I don't claim to be as advanced at all, but I have tasted a lot of wines, right? And so like one thing that I try to have people compare things to is like Sauvignon Blanc, right? Like a really good high acid Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, for example, how it's just gonna, you know, you can really feel it, compared to maybe something that's not as acidic. So maybe like a Chardonnay that's from California. But see, things like that, because I've tasted wines from, you know, California, from New Zealand. When you're in South Africa, you don't necessarily have access to that wide range. So it's harder for us in South Africa for me to say, okay, go get a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and then go get like a Chardonnay or get a Sauvignon Blanc from Stellenbosch and see what the difference is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is tough. I think, yeah, the access to international wines in South Africa does make it tricky. I mean, I know when we were doing our level 3, there were a couple of us that all kind of, you know, everybody kind of chips in and a case is bought, and then at least you're not committing to pulling corks on 12 bottles of wine and you got to sit at home and you're suddenly sitting with all of the stock, you know, making sense of finding it. I mean, I'm trying to think, there definitely is someone that imports some international stuff in South Africa. I forget the name now. Maybe like Cyberseller, maybe. I think they have access to stuff like, you know, like the stock standards Argentinian Malbec from Mendoza and Marlborough Sauvignon. You know, I think it's really good to taste those wines as a benchmark at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, you know, ultimately you can only have a reference according to what you have been exposed to, you know, and similarly that goes to things like flavor descriptors. If you never tasted a gooseberry, how the hell are you going to smell or taste a gooseberry in a wine? And that for me is frustrating because, you know, if that isn't part of your vernacular, then I find it really hard or harsh even for an examining body to mark someone down because, oh, they've never tasted a green apple, you know, but green apple should be on the tasting note, so why isn't it there? It's a bit frustrating. The last point that I wanted to make, which in hindsight, I don't know if it's as important in that level 3, but I certainly think it would show a greater depth of knowledge in those tasting notes. But one of the big things that I learned when going through that deductive tasting step by step is that you almost kind of start in this pyramid formation, right? So let's say you smell green fruit. From green fruit, it then sort of extrapolates. Okay, is it apple? Is it kiwi, etc.? Let's say you're smelling apple. What type of apple is it? Is it a green apple? Is it a red apple? Is it a yellow apple? And then from there, once you identify what type of fruit, like what type of apple it is, for example, it's then going one step further and then identifying the nature of the fruit. And that's where I found examiners really kind of catch on to the fact that you're thinking deeper into it. So by nature of the fruit, I mean, is it a toffee apple? Is it a underripe apple still kind of hanging on the tree? Is it an overripe apple that's been baking in the sun? Is it apple pie? You know, that smell, that nature of the fruit will change according to each wine. And like I say, I don't know if it is necessary for level 3, but certainly in all of the tasting that I did in the build-up diploma, there was a big thing that they kept kind of stressing, that the more you can show that you are really considering and pulling apart what you're smelling and tasting, it shows this kind of greater level of knowledge, a step up. And I think for me, that's something with the WSET that keeps coming up, is that they want to know that you are digging deeper, that you're not just learning the 3 main varieties of champagne. They want to know that you know all 5, 8, whatever it is. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent point, because that's what we try to do in our deductive tasting too. So like if we say, okay, if it's a fruit, I'll say start off with the fruit, like just name a fruit category, like is it a tropical fruit? And then if it's a pineapple, is it a dried pineapple? Is it a candied pineapple? Is it a fresh pineapple? So I'm not sure if that's necessarily required, but it definitely doesn't hurt. And then
For
it
sure.
also can give you clues as to other things that you're tasting in the wine, right? So like if it's a dried pineapple, maybe it's an aged wine. And that's
Absolutely.
what I try to reinforce to everybody. It's deductive, like you're literally pulling it apart. So I love that tip. Okay. Yay! Okay, so do you have any more tips for deductive tasting, or does anybody else have any questions about this deductive tasting? I thought that those tips, like all of those tips, were great. So I wrote the notes down. I'll send out the notes after this if you guys need the notes. But yeah, anybody have any questions? No? You guys are such good students. Wellington, I think you have a question. You can always put your question in the chat too if you want to chat your question.
Wellington, I think you're still on mute, mate. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still on mute. There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go. All right.
Nice.
I've got a new phone, so it's trying to learn it. So I've read the level 3 book the first time, and I'm reading it the second time. The first time, you know, when you read a book and you become more confused and you know, it becomes like. But now when I'm going for the second time, I'm getting to understand better. So when I compared with the exam papers and some paraphrasing online, and I realized that the kind of questioning, the actual questions that come on the exams and on the, it's not what we see online. Yes, we studied that much. We go through that book the first time, the second time, the third time. We try to read other books around. But having gone through level 3 and level 4, what's the main secret to be able to first to understand? Because definitely need to understand, because you go through all those countries. It's Bordeaux, Chile, it's Austria, it's Hungary. It's just crazy. It's another level, and the more you study, the more you get into enjoy it, because you learn more about other countries. You learn that different places you never thought actually they are making such amazing wines, and it's quite exciting, an exciting journey. But now it becomes your mind when you get towards the exam, you feel like you haven't actually started studying it. Just go back to the books. What's the secret to actually achieve this level, or to yes, I think
I think that pretty much, I think that covers, that's the question. And that's perfect, Wellington, because Angelo, that's what I wanted to move into next. It's like, can you give us some study tricks and tips? Because it's not enough to just read the book, right? How do you get that knowledge to like stay into your head?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, so I found the jump from level 2 to level 3 pretty big. Look, I hadn't had the exposure to international wine that I had when preparing for my diploma. I was still in South Africa when I did level 2 and 3, but I really did find that jump quite big in terms of the amount of knowledge expected to kind of be retained and that you can be examined on. Look, I think one of the things that helped me so much, like, and maybe it's because I have quite a sort of photographic memory. I'm very visually driven and I have a lot of visual associations. But one of the best things I did was I literally turned one of the walls in my bedroom into, essentially it was a massive map, but I went and photocopied every single one of those maps that was in all of those textbooks and pinned them on the wall in my room, and literally, you know, for each region, wrote down the main grape varieties, I wrote down the main producers. And for me, it was then, I think wine is so many different disciplines rolled into one. It's history, it's art, it's geography, it's chemistry, it's biology. But, you know, I think geography is one of the big kind of determining factors when it comes to so many aspects of wine styles and wine characteristics. And so looking at a map and being able to visually see where Piemonte is in Italy, you can then also, again, use your kind of common sense and deductive skills to say, okay, we're in northern Italy, we're at high altitude, the wines are probably going to be, you know, of X, Y, and Z character because of that. I think, honestly, one of the best things I did was just print out all of those maps. There must have been probably 30 plus covering my wall. It looked goddamn awful, but it was one of the best things I did. It really, really, really helped. The other thing that I found super useful, which I had never ever done before, not in studying in high school, not at university, but I made hundreds and hundreds of flashcards. So literally, you know, question on one side, answers on the back. And I just literally left those lying around the house. I left them in the bathroom. I left them in the kitchen. And as you kind of go about your daily routine, just kind of picking one up, looking on the back and seeing, you know, what the answers are, but you're constantly testing yourself and testing your knowledge in that sense. And yes, those are obviously little spark notes and doesn't necessarily allow you to kind of formulate a full essay answer out of it, but it's those little nuggets of information that hopefully when you sit down on exam day are still stuck in your head somewhere and you can kind of pull them out. I found those flashcards to be really, really, really helpful in terms of retaining all that information.
One of the things I haven't done the maps, but I'm definitely going to print out some maps. And next time somebody comes to my house, they're going to be like, what is she doing? But so I'm definitely going to do the maps. And then the flashcards, I definitely do the flashcards. I love the flashcards. But one of the things that I do too, Wellington, I don't know if this will help. Let me see if I can find it, if I have the right notebook. But I basically, because I'm a visual person and I like to put information down and then like write down like what goes where. So, oh, here it is. So for example, when I was studying for level 2 and I was like, this is for Grenache, right? I don't know if you guys could see this, okay? But like this, I know it looks like mumbo jumbo to you guys, but like literally for me to like put it in categories of boxes, it helped me remember what was what. And so kind of like the pyramid that he was talking about, this is kind of like my version of that pyramid. Okay, you have Grenache, you have these 3 major regions, and then these are like the characteristics. So I don't know if that helps you guys too, but that's something that I do.
Color. I see you use color there too, because that's also
yeah, and color keeps me, when I'm studying, it keeps me like excited and motivated. So that would be a tip. And then so I did this, and I know like because of COVID, we're all having like financial struggles because our businesses, our work situation isn't the same as it was before COVID. So we can't all get the study material like we normally would be able to get the study guide, right? And so what I did was, I had that in mind. So I did research on the internet to say, okay, how can I get information for these people that, you know, they want to study for WSET, but they don't have the study guide. So I found this really cool website, this guy, Alex, and he has these free notes. He's like a diploma level. And so he had his notes laid out. Then I found another person who said, okay, here's the book, but here are the different chapters, and you should put them in this order. And that order made sense. So that's how we're kind of like following that study method with the countries that we're kind of grouping them together, and then we're just going to kind of move along. So if you got the email, I would pretty much use that. It wasn't something I just put together. I really put a lot of thought into that to help you guys, if you don't have the book, to kind of go through this process. So yeah, just a tip. Does anybody else have any tips? Like, is Takara still on the phone? Is Takara still here? Takara, do you have any tips from when you studied?
No, I'm kind of like Angelo, where I was lucky. I was working in restaurants and hotels where we had vast wine lists, and you'd get to open something new all the time and taste it as you go. I've become a meticulous note taker. So when you see me disappear, it's not that I'm disappearing. It's just that today I don't have a desk, so I have to put my phone down and then write notes. Yeah, like at that time, I had access to so many wines, which is what I miss. Being in Zim is hard because I did my WSET in Australia, So being here, I don't have access to nearly as many wines as I once did. But I think you guys in South Africa do. And now that South Africa is open to export wine again, I can now start working with, I think Norman Goodfellows is a good one. They have wines from all over the world. So hopefully as we're going through the course that you set out, Tuanni, I can hopefully be able to pick out a few bottles from each region and keep.
Yeah, and so I'm working on it, you guys. I'm reaching out to people all the time. I'm trying to get some sponsors to like sponsor a couple bottles. And then you guys are more than welcome. If you're in SA, if you're in Cape Town, you're more than welcome to come by my house if we get the wines, and then like we can try it. You know, if we have one bottle that I can make that last for 20 people, really. But
Exactly.
and then too, if we have, some, we may have some donations, we might have to put some money of our own, but the point is we'll get those wines. And I think too, if you have a job opportunity that might not pay as much, you might even want to volunteer for like a really fancy hotel, nice hotel. If you volunteer, say, I'll work a couple days, but at the end of the night, can I try some of the open bottles, just be as creative. I feel like wherever there's a will, there's a way.
Also, the giant thing that really, really helped me was learning how other people experience the wine. So I possibly wasn't the smartest sommelier on the floor like all those years ago in Australia, but I could empathize with people and start being able to plug in certain buzzwords from the customer that I could make sure that they have a beautiful wine experience. So I think it's really, really, well, for me, it was really important just to interact with people, and which is hard now with COVID and all the rest. But I really, really enjoyed that experience of hopefully recommending a perfect bottle for a table.
Yeah. And I think that's why the tasting group is important too. Even if you come and you don't have a wine to taste, like something that happened in the tasting group just this past Tuesday when we were tasting Malbec. Somebody had a Malbec from like Pearl. I think it was mine. I had a Malbec from like Pearl, Wellington region. And then somebody had a Malbec that was like from Elgin, right? Which is a cooler region. And it was a cold day. And so they didn't even enjoy the Elgin wine as much. But when we went through the deductive tasting, it checked all the boxes, right? So it was well balanced, but they didn't enjoy it as much. And that's because it was from a cooler region. So it was a lighter version of Malbec, right? And then I had a warmer version of Malbec, a more fruitier version that was perfect, that was perfect on a cool day. And so it was cool to hear how these wines, like how people experience them. And so like if you were working the floor of a restaurant, you can say, okay, if it's summertime in Cape Town, you're going to recommend Malbec from Elgin rather than a Malbec from Stellenbosch, because the Elgin one is going to be a lot lighter and you might want the lighter wine on a hotter day. So I think even if you don't have the wine to taste, some people stay away from the tasting group because they're like, I don't have a wine, but it's still cool to listen and to take notes about what people were saying about the grape varietal. Any more tips for actually the study part of studying for the advanced SOM exam? No? Okay, so I'll send a summary of that too, because I feel like those were some really useful tips. So now let's talk about, we went through that really quickly. So now I think we can talk about some fun stuff. We can talk about, like, in general, how do you pair wines? What are some of the rules that you have? Let's not even talk about the rules that we have, right? Let's talk about the rules that WSET lays out in general for wine pairing.
So, yeah, I think the WSET obviously has a very kind of step-by-step, I guess, approach to everything, quite frankly. But yeah, I think that there are definitely certain principles that are kind of fundamental when it comes to those wine pairings. I always work, and forgive me if I can't exactly remember what those WSET and the level 3 sort of plan out for you. But I always kind of work according to like 5 sort of principles when it comes to pairing. So I always look at balance. So, you know, where the food and food and wine are going to kind of balance one another out. If something is perhaps too heavy on one aspect, where you get a wine that then balances that out. I look at texture. So the sort of textural component of food and wine, how something that's quite kind of fatty benefits from something that has quite high acid. That for me is always really, really important. I look at then the 2 sort of opposite ends of the spectrum. So on one side, you can have food and wine that complement one another because they are quite similar in nature. And then you can also have food and wine that are kind of contrasting. So they are quite different ends of the spectrum. So something like, you know, caramel popcorn. So you kind of got savory and sweet sort of wrapped up in the same thing. You know, what is going to be balancing that in terms of the contrasting flavors. And then lastly, the one principle that I always kind of go back to is the concept of terroir. And I think for me, that's actually more of a starting point when it comes to figuring out wine pairings. I think more so, it's probably more pertinent in an old world context. But I think, you know, for centuries now, you've had food and wine evolve side by side, particularly in Europe and the old world. And that's happened for a reason, right? People have been drinking red Sangiovese in Chianti for millennia, and you know, 9 times out of 10, the classic typical food from that region is probably going to complement that wine. You think about ragu that comes from like wild boar, that with a full-bodied, high alcohol, high tannin Sangiovese, let's say it's a Chianti Classico, or even something like a Brunello, is a match made in heaven. You know, goat cheese, a massive tradition in the Loire Valley. 9 times out of 10, the wines that come out of that region are high acid, Chenin Blanc, Cremant, sparkling, and those with a kind of higher fat content, creamier cheese, texturally, that's going to kind of balance. So I always kind of start as terroir being the baseline, and then from there I kind of move around, if that makes sense. So I'll consider that food product, where does it come from, what is typically drunk alongside it, and then sort of move on from there, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Do you think that it would be beneficial, more beneficial, less beneficial, or it wouldn't even matter? I was thinking about introducing like some food pairings to our deductive tasting sessions. Maybe starting off by saying, hey, get a lemon wedge, get some salt, get a piece of cheese, whatever. And then like, let's taste these wines like we usually do. But then at the end of it, now let's taste them with these snacks or foods.
Fantastic.
Okay, so beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that's super beneficial, because, you know, and especially when you're looking at it on a really kind of micro level. So like, you're looking at a lemon wedge, which is like whack of acid in your face, or you're looking at like raw salt, boom, whack of salt in your face. Like that really does give you a very raw, I suppose, example of, here's the food stuff in its purest form, and then this is how the wine that you're drinking it with kind of transforms that experience. Super great idea. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions about wine and food pairing? Everybody kind of understands like the whole point of wine and food pairing. Okay, Monica, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I got the 5 concepts down. It was, can you repeat them for me, please?
Most certainly, absolutely. So balance, texture, complementing, and then contrasting, so 3 and 4, and then terroir, which is number 5.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're most welcome. Yeah, I think, you know what, I'll be honest with you. I actually really struggle when it comes to the food and wine pairing aspect of the exam side of things. I think, yes, there are obviously baseline examples, like I say, just in my example there, Loire Valley, goat's cheese, sparkling wine, high acid, blah, blah, blah. But for me, there's often, wine isn't just necessarily about the food pairing, right? It's the company you're keeping, it's the occasion that you're drinking with, it's where you're drinking it, how you're drinking it. I think all of that really does play into it. Obviously, WSET couldn't be asked if it's your grandmother's 80th birthday or a wedding anniversary, but still, I think I'm perhaps a little more romantic in my approach to food and wine pairings.
I agree 100%. So I actually studied with the North American Sommelier Association as well, right? And so we had a whole section on food and wine pairing. And for their section on food and wine pairing, I happened to be out for that section. But then it was like this whole thing. And then that was on the test. And that was like the one area that I didn't do so well in. But in my everyday job, that's what I do. I teach people how to pair wine with food, right? And so for me, it's more about emotions. It could be about where you are. It could be about your cultural background. Like one of my favorite pairings is fried chicken and champagne or sparkling wine. You know what I mean? Yes, right? But that's not going to be on any SOM exam,
Yeah.
If I write that on my test, they're going to be like, what? And so I think, we have to learn about it the way that they teach us for that reason. But sometimes when I'm just going to get off topic a little bit, but even when you talk about diversity in wine, I don't think that in these advanced SOM exams, they take different cultures and regions. Like even in South Africa, I might pair rye with like a pinotage, and that's not even on the test, Or, I might have a chicken that's on the brie, and I might pair that with the Merlot, and it's a delicious pairing, but it's not going to be on the exam. So anyway, I'll stop preaching, but yes.
No. But I think you make a really, really good point, and one of the things that that Drinkclusive group is really driving right now is exactly that. It's about the fact that that entire content course, all of it is so driven by antiquated Western ideals and views of wine, whereas we can go as far as saying like off-dry Riesling pairs well with Asian food, and yet we can't put traditional Asian ingredients into a tasting note. It really doesn't kind of add up for me. And I think Dawn Davies, who I mentioned earlier, the MW, is really doing some amazing work with the WSET and trying to kind of shift that paradigm now and being like, guys, it's 2020. Like things need to kind of evolve and catch up with the times. Has to.
Well, I mean, I was really, really fortunate to represent Zimbabwe at the International Sommeliers Cup, and I came across. We were kind of bunched with a group of guys from Asia, and that off-dry Riesling versus spice is everything that I've been taught in my WSET training. But some of their better SOMs were like, oh, look, it's okay to pair spice with spice.
Yeah.
It's okay to pair.
It's okay to Syrah with like a Syrah with Mexican food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was super interesting for me. That was like a practical experience where I was like, okay, well, let's try this. And yeah, there are a lot of instances where spice and Shiraz, where spice on spice actually works much, much better than putting something sweet with something spicy.
And that was exactly the point that was made. So we dial into these Drinkclusive chats it's almost bi-weekly now. But that was exactly the point that someone brought up, is like, it's only, okay, not only, but we're going to generalize here, like white Western folk that want to like dumb down the spice and like balance it out. And so, yes, we go for an off-dry Riesling. But some cultures want to feel the buzz, and And so pairing it with something spicy that's maybe going to hum it up, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that's wrong either, you know?
Yeah. Some people can handle
I love that interaction. Like I thought that was, well, that was the highlight of my Som Cup experience.
Awesome.
I love it. Okay, so does anybody have anything else to add to wine and food pairing? Or maybe they just want to share their favorite food pairing? Their favorite snack with wine? No? Okay. No, ruffles. Who had the ruffles? So we were doing a tasting, and one of our members, she didn't have breakfast. She was in the United States, so it was early for her. It was lunchtime. So she was drinking, was it the Malbec or was it another wine we were drinking? It was the Malbec, right? And so she hadn't had anything to eat, and so she was drinking the Malbec, and she didn't really like it. And then she went and she got some ruffled potato chips, and that saltiness brought out the flavor in the ruffled potato chips. She was like, "Wow, the wine is a lot better." So yeah.
Beautiful.
Food pairing. Okay.
It just goes to the fact that salt is just a flavor enhancer, even with our liquid consumption.
Yeah, that's true. Salt makes everything better. Salt and bacon.
Absolutely.
All right, and butter. I'm so American.
Salt, bacon, and
Got my
butter.
heart.
You know, why don't you just fry your bacon in some butter and just sprinkle some salt on it and just die the next day?
Oh my Lord.
Wait, what would you pair that with though? Okay, that's the challenge. Maybe some sparkling wine. Okay, so now let's just talk about I know, sorry. Now let's just talk about some tips. So like some tips when we're storing the wine. I mean, like I know I teach the wine tasting classes to novice wine drinkers all the time. And I tell people, like, I can probably predict the top 3 questions that I'm going to get when I teach these classes. And the number 1 question is always about like storage and serving wine. Like what temperature should you store and should you serve your wine? So can we just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. For sure, like 9 times out of 10, when I do a tasting, I will typically get the temperature question, because I'm a little bit of a stickler when it comes to temperature and actual the serving temperature of wine. And I think that so often, particularly with reds, we just drink them way too warm. And I think that's a general trend all over the world. I think here in the UK, I think in South Africa, you know, the idea of room temperature is something that, again, is like, you know, countryside France in the autumn, you know, room temperature, which as they would anticipate it being something like 17, 18 degrees Celsius. I mean, I don't think it's been 17 or 18 in my house the whole year. You know, in the summer it's more than that. In the winter it's more than that because the heating's on. And if you're pulling wines straight off the shelf, you know, without any kind of refrigeration, I think you're probably going to be drinking it too warm, and there's implications to that. You know, something like, you know, a really full-bodied red, if it's too warm, alcohol becomes volatile. You know, it becomes a very, very different drinking experience, as opposed to if it is slightly chilled, if it is more within that bracket of 17, 18 degrees. The tannin feels better, the fruit sings better, the alcohol is more in balance. I think, yeah, temperature of service is really, really, really important. And I think there is kind of, you know, a moving scale, and I'm sure this comes up in the textbooks. I can't remember exactly, but, you know, the more full-bodied your wine is, obviously the warmer you can pour it. But when I say warmer, I think, you know, 18 degrees is sort of the threshold. And then in your red wine spectrum, the lighter that wine gets, the lower you can then drop that temperature. So something like a super light-bodied, call it a Morgon, a Beaujolais, for example, something quite delicate, Gamay Noir, soft tannin, lower alcohol, you can drop that temperature down as far as 15, 14 degrees Celsius even. And in that scenario, then the wine is brighter, the wine is more perfumed, the red fruit is, you know, a little more perky. I think that really, really does determine the drinking experience in a huge, huge way. I found that with my wine quite a bit. If you serve it just literally straight off the shelf, you pour yourself a glass and off you go, it's fine. But as soon as you get the temperature down to about 15 degrees Celsius, the transformation is insane. It's astronomical. So yeah, I mean, I think having really good storage facilities, if you are a bar or a restaurant, is very important. Equally, I think, you know, thinking about that storage then in a very logical sense, hot air risers. So wines that you would prefer to have at a slightly warmer temperature, keep higher up on your shelving or within your wine fridge. Wines that are going to be cooler, stack those lower down. So kind of your really light-bodied whites and sparkling wines have lower down in the fridge, and then moving upwards towards lighter reds, and then more full-bodied at the top. That's just always a kind of a general rule of thumb I work on. Yeah, in that sense. And yeah, I think that's kind of all I've got on wine temperature and wine service. Yeah, it's a tricky one to get right, because, you know, you can play around with ice buckets and drop it in and out of fridges. You're never going to get it perfect, obviously. But I always say, especially when it comes to red wines, I'd rather start too cold and allow it to warm up than have to work the other way around. Like suddenly trying to drop it in ice buckets, and then you've over chilled it, and then you're trying to get it out again, and jumping in and out. Just that's a goddamn stressful experience if you've ever worked in hospitality.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense too. So like, I'm from Los Angeles, which is generally warm, and in all of California, like the entire state is having a heat wave right now. So it's like 100 degrees no matter where you are in the state. So if you serve that wine at room temperature, like, it's going to be way too warm.
Yeah.
And so like, if you can't afford a fridge, I mean, when I lived in LA, I actually had to buy a fridge because we would have those heat waves, and my apartment just got way too hot to have wine sitting out around for 3 months. But put it in the refrigerator, like just chill it for like 20 minutes before you serve it. If you live in a state, unless you live somewhere like where it's usually cool, then I think room temperature might be okay. But South Africa is not usually cool.
That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure.
And I know Zimbabwe is not usually cool either. And Florida for sure is not usually cool. I think the key takeaway from that, though, is just to remember that the warmer the alcohol, the more volatile it becomes. And then that also works for white wine, because if you serve your white wine too cold, then you can't really pick up all of those aromas and those flavors. But for the WSET, and when I send the notes out, I will include their chart of what it should be according to like the actual number, so you can look at that chart and just kind of memorize what they say. But I think when you're working on the floor, it's a combination of what that chart is and what your gut is too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I think that is a really good point you make, though, because unfortunately, like, whatever that WSET note says, that's gospel. Like, when it comes to your exam, at least, like whatever that is in that note, that is what they expect. But I think, you know, using your common sense when it comes to actual service and floor work, that goes a lot further than, you know, really trying to stick a thermometer in and say, well, WSET said this.
yeah. Any questions about wine storage? Okay, go ahead. Huh?
Yeah, mine won't really be about wine storage, but talking about service, I'm gonna go back to the proper or the correct wine glasses. You know, how does that affect wine, and you know, what's the correct glass, you know, for each wine or for each grape varietal at least. Yeah.
For sure. So so again, I think they'll, you know, I'm going to give you the WSET note, but then also what my personal tasting notes are as well. So the big one that I always not disagree with, but I just think it makes such a vast difference, is sparkling wine. So according to WSET, you use a flute, so something very narrow, very long. The idea is that you're almost kind of funneling in all of the aroma. You have the bubble that can kind of gently move up through the glass, and everything is quite sort of concentrated, right? It doesn't give you the ability to, I don't know if you've ever tried to swirl a champagne flute. It's a bloody disaster. It doesn't work. So for me, for the sake of standing around and drinking, the flute serves its purpose. And I genuinely think that was one of my questions in my level 3 was, why do we drink a sparkling wine out of a flute? I think that came up. However, in general service, I prefer to serve it almost in the equivalent of what a white wine glass would be. So a slightly smaller bowl, quite a narrow opening at the top, but something that actually has a little bit of a bowl to it. Because, I mean, champagne is champagne, sparkling wine in general is a really, really complex wine, right? Not only do you have all of the aspects of a normal wine, but now you've also got the added elements of texture, of bubble, the effervescence. I mean, all of that now really kind of changes the dynamic of the wine in a huge way. And by being able to kind of swirl it, that wine opens up, it changes. I mean, I've seen people decant sparkling wine, decant champagne before, which, to the average drinker is like, why the hell are you doing that? Like, don't we only decant red wine? But I mean, a champagne that goes, a really kind of vintage aged champagne that goes into a decanter is a miraculous thing. It's incredible. So yeah, I personally, Angelo, would say sparkling wine out of what would be a white wine glass. So a smaller bowl, kind of tapered head, and yeah, it gives you space to really kind of smell and experience it better. But I think according to the textbook, you're looking at a long flute, slightly tapered end to it, and that's going to really kind of funnel aromas, and keep the wine showing well. White wines, as I mentioned, slightly kind of smaller shape. I think as a rule of thumb, you can kind of anticipate that wines that are easier drinking, that are kind of neutral varieties, so stuff like Muscadet, Picpoul de Pinet, Trebbiano, grape varieties that are really just kind of serving up solid drinking wines that don't necessarily have complexity to them, don't necessarily need as much space to open up and breathe and transform. Whereas as you then move, up the pecking order in the white category, for example, when you start working with Chardonnay from Burgundy, when you're looking at, aged Chenin Blanc from Loire, when you're looking at Greco di Tufo from Campania, those grape varieties are elegant, they are really, really layered. Then your bowl starts to get slightly bigger, the wine needs a little more space to kind of breathe and move around. But that'll definitely play into the entire drinking experience. Once again, it will really, really shape and transform that. And I think the same then kind of goes for red wines. Really kind of basic, easy drinking reds probably don't need those really kind of big soup bowl-esque kind of glasses. But as you move into wines that are, I guess, more complex, that have a higher density in terms of the kind of chemical makeup of it, right? Stuff that's aged, there's way more going on. It's had more time to develop. And yeah, those will really benefit then from kind of pouring into much bigger bowls, glasses where you can swirl, and where the oxygen can really move through and open up, change, and shift the form of that.
I think that's great. And so, like, if you need a refresher on the glassware too, how it affects the taste of wine. First of all, there was an article. I can share that. I can share a link to that article with you guys. I'll see if I can find it and put it in the chat. But it just came out where somebody was talking about how the glass actually changes the flavors in wine, and it even changes it more so than aerating it. And then also last season we had a Riedel Riedel representative come on the show, and he gave me a whole set of glasses, and then we tasted creation wines, and we tasted each wine varietal in each different glass, and it was amazing. Like, I was blown away to see how the wine changed per glass. Like the Chardonnay glass, it literally tastes so much better in the actual Chardonnay glass. And then like the Syrah did not taste well in the Chardonnay glass, but it tasted absolutely delicious in the Syrah glass. So glasses do matter, and you can go back to our study group from the Riedel show. It's on my YouTube channel, and yeah, I'll send you the link for that too. But I would watch that because it's pretty awesome to see. It was like magical.
That's awesome.
But for WSET though, WSET, of course, they tell you which glasses. So they're saying like, even like the port or the dessert wine, how WSET tells you to use that tiny glass. And Monica and I, we tasted the Olorosi. How do you say it? Olorosi by, there we go. Yes.
Nice.
100-point wine. We tasted that, and we used like white wine glasses. And I think that if we had used like dessert, like really small glasses that they tell you to use, we wouldn't have gotten the full experience. And that wine, the aromas in it were so complex and so wonderful. Like, we literally smelled it for like 20-30 minutes before we tasted it, and we were satisfied. But you wouldn't get that in a small dessert glass. But WSET would probably tell you small dessert glass and champagne.
Oh gosh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any more questions about glassware? That was a great question. That was Don. That was a great question about the glassware.
I'll probably ask a quick question about decanting.
That's a good.
How do you feel about decanters? Like, I tend to decant everything, but yeah, like, am I wasting my time with light white wines? And then, yeah.
So again, I really struggle to give people rules of thumb when it comes to decanting. I think generally speaking, there are very, very, very few instances where decanting will damage a wine, if that makes sense. There's been one occasion where I've had a circumstance where, so I think this is a few years ago, but it was a 1998 Barbera de Alba. Okay, we opened it, we poured a little taster, and it was really, really tight. The wine was really kind of shut down. We decided to decant it. That wine completely transformed. Like, it was one of the most magical wines that I've ever tasted. And I think the decanting, that was the result of the decanting. However, within, I would say 25 minutes, maybe half an hour, that entire wine just imploded on itself. It was like bright and huge and voluptuous and rich, and just like, it was magic. And then it just completely shut down. And I think that maybe that was because of the age of it, and it maybe didn't necessarily have all of the foundational, the kind of the structure to hold it together. And it actually just, kind of fell apart. So that's the one instance that I've had in tasting, or at least drinking a wine, where decanting, it benefited it, but then it also, kind of flopped it out the other side. But here's the thing, right? If you're decanting light whites and you're decanting heavy reds, I think at the end of the day, the fact that you pour yourself a glass and you swirl it around, the reason why you're swirling it is to allow oxygen to move through and to open it up. Decanting it is essentially kind of amplifying that process, right? You're speeding it up in a sense. So I'm a big fan of decanting. I'm not necessarily fussy about the shape of the decanter and, whether it's got, there's so many weird and wonderful decanters out there these days that I think a lot of it is just aesthetic. You end up pouring it out of a fish and it looks pretty, but like, is that actually adding to the wine drinking experience? Who knows? But I'm with you. I'm a big fan. I would rather decant if I was unsure than not, and maybe miss out on an opportunity,
I think that you bring up a good point too about like, aged wine, right? Because a lot of times people will say the misconception is if a wine is older, you're supposed to decant it, right? And they don't understand that you decant older wines just simply to remove the sediment. You don't decant older wines to aerate them, right? So you decant them very carefully. I tasted, when we tasted our Pinotage, one of my favorite wineries here in South Africa is Granger's, and they only do vintage. So anything you buy from there is going to be 10 years old. And I think it was a 2006 Pinotage.
Tasted that.
It was, when I tasted it, I was like, oh my God, it was amazing. Yeah. It was so structured. The fruit was beautiful. The tannins were just elegant. It was a beautiful wine, right? However, and I was going to save some for Monica, and I was like, I'm going to give her this wine the next day. And I don't know if it was the next day or later that night, but I went to taste the wine, and it was a completely different wine, It just didn't hold together. It was like, and that's the thing with older wines. Like, older wines are not wines that you can open up and you can say, I'm going to drink this over a couple days. Like, when you open that wine, you got to be prepared to drink the entire bottle. There's some younger wines I open up. Like, there's this one wine, it's called Rubicon, and it's from Inglenook Winery in California, and it's from Napa Valley, and it's a delicious wine, but it's one of those wines that you're supposed to lay down for like 10, 15, 20 years, and I just don't have the patience for that. So I remember wanting to show off, and I opened it up, and I was like, okay, if I decant it for like 2 hours, it should be good or whatever, and it was okay, it was drinkable, but then we didn't drink the whole bottle, and I sipped on it for the next few days, and it just got better and better and better because it was, a young wine. But the older wines, no, you gotta drink them right away.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that.
Okay. Let's see. Any more questions before we let Angelo go? I think we covered a lot of stuff. I took some notes, so I'll just send a recap with all the notes in it. But do you guys have any more questions about like wine storage, decanting, aerating, the glasses that you should use? Any tips or any tasting tips, study tips or tasting tips?
I don't know if anyone else is interested in this, but I'd like to know a little bit more about Angelo's winemaking journey and that whole side of things. I feel that interests me a little bit more than restaurants and hotels, which is basically 100% of my knowledge. So yeah.
I think you should start off by telling us what, I know because I already read up on it, what Yo El Rey means. I like the name because I was like, Yo El Rey raps or Yo MTV raps, but yeah, anyway.
So the name Yo El Rey, in Spanish it means I the King. And essentially this is like going back to when I think I hadn't even started my journey in wine, I don't think. But I remember reading a book about Picasso, and when he was a young man, one of his early, I think it was a self-portrait, he signed Yo El Rey, and it was kind of just like this affirmation of sort of believing in yourself and like believing in the journey, and like, if you're really committed to a craft and it's something that you want to pursue, like, the king's inside all of us, you just need to kind of believe in that. So it was one of those weird things where like I always used to write it on my on my journals, on my planners. It was always kind of floating around. And when it came to eventually, like, guys, making a wine is actually a pretty easy process. Like, it's not that complicated. Branding a wine, like coming up with the name, the voice, how it looks, how it feels, the colors, I mean, that just like popped my brain, and it had me, I can be indecisive at the best of times. So literally, I mean, I spent weeks like pulling apart names and colors and shapes and God knows what. But it was funny because, I was really hesitant to commit to Yo El Rey only because it's a South African wine. I don't have any links to Spain. 9 times out of 10, even now, when I introduce the wine to people, I'm like, Yo El Rey. People are like, Yo El what? Yeah, how do you spell that? Like, what does it mean? And then it obviously unravels. But I mean, maybe that's an opportunity to kind of explain the process and what it's about. But yeah, I mean, I ended up naming it Yo El Rey, and you know, if you do kind of jump on the website at some point, you'll see like the name is sort of like a brushstroke, sort of alluding to the fact that Picasso was an inspiration in the process. And yeah, I mean, it hasn't been easy. It's my first foray into entrepreneurship, really, and it's obviously quite difficult doing it from afar. I have assistants in South Africa via a gentleman by the name of Francois Haasbroek. He makes wines under the Black Water label. I don't know if any of you have come across it in South Africa. It's quite small. I believe that Public Wine Bar stocks and sells it. And he has been an old friend of mine. So when I first cut my teeth in wine, I was working at Waterford Wine Estate in Stellenbosch when I was a student. And that's really where I kind of started sinking my teeth into it. And he was then the winemaker at Waterford. This is going back to 2007, and we've stayed friends ever since. And in kind of hatching the plan to start making my own wine, he kind of offered to just kind of lend a hand whilst I'm still back here in London and kind of kicking off sales and marketing in the UK. He sort of keeps an eye on the barrels, tops it up, makes sure that, you know, it's not turning to vinegar. And it's been, you know, without him, I would really have struggled to kind of put the whole project together. But it's been an amazing process, and I'm making mistakes every day. I'm learning a hell of a lot. The 2019 is getting labeled this week and should be shipping out to the UK by the end of the month, and will probably be live in South Africa, I'd imagine, in September via Public. Again, they are distributing in South Africa for me. So it's super exciting. It's also really daunting, but it's been an awesome experience.
It's in the can, like it's already.
It's out there. It's out there for sure.
There's little you can do about it now. So like, I think just write it up. But can you spell Yo El Rey?
Absolutely. So first word Yo, Y-O. Next word L, E-L.
Yeah.
Next word Rey, R-E-Y. Yo El Rey.
I guess it's a little bit easier for me because I'm from Los Angeles, so I halfway speak Spanish. So I was like, Yo El Rey, it's like perfect, right?
The Americans don't have any issues. My girlfriend's from the East Coast, and I was like, I think I want to call it Yo El Rey. She's like, yeah, it's awesome. I'm the king. I'm like, literally no one is gonna know what the hell it means. Like it's
like in South Africa, they're like, what is that some kind of secret cult? But like for me, I was like, okay, I am king. It makes sense. I was like, okay. That's so funny. But he also put the link to his website in the chat box. So if you haven't looked at the chat box, look at the chat box, because there's a link to his website. And then maybe when it's out in South Africa in September, we can all go grab a bottle and then we can use it in our deductive tasting. That would be fun. Like a one-off. Yeah,
for sure. Amazing. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah, I would love to get a bottle across to you guys.
That'll be good.
Yes. Do you have any more questions about his wine journey?
I guess again with the wine making, do your WSET skills help with that, or did you have to get the horticulture route?
I think a big chunk of what I learned was learnt via those kind of, so I've done a harvest at Waterford back in the day, so that was 2012. I did another harvest in the north of Italy, in Suave, so just outside of Valpolicella, and then I did that third harvest in Sonoma in Northern California. And I think the WSET gives you an incredible amount of knowledge when it comes to the theory behind winemaking, and then particularly so, like, you know, those regions, those grape varieties, the soil types. The WSET is invaluable in that sense, and it really forces you to kind of dig really, really deep into the theory, but by far I learned way more practically hands-on, you know, punching down, pumping over, racking wine, like all of these words that you read about in a textbook. But I didn't have a clue what racking a wine meant or looked like until I actually did it. And I don't think I would have been able to have made that jump purely from the WSET textbooks. It was definitely driven by practical experience. And I mean, you know, for me, I think those travels abroad were incredibly enlightening from you know, a cultural perspective. But I learned so much just being totally immersed in it. You know, you break your back every day for 2 months. It's really hard work. But you know, if you find yourself at a great cellar with a great support and actually kind of nurturing mentorship in that environment, it's incredible. It's one of the best experiences you can have, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I've only just had a little bit of cellar experience. One time in Australia, one time in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it really does teach you a lot. But they were both producing some pretty distinctive styles of wine. So I felt it was kind of closed off from the whole operation, rather than we broke up into teams. But yeah, no, thanks for that. Like, it's really inspiring, because I love to be out in the dirt and that kind of thing. I think my days are behind me.
I would imagine, though, if you have the chance, and like lots of wineries, trust me, they will take you. They'll provide like room and board. Sometimes they might not pay you, but they'll definitely provide room and board. And it's such a great experience. I worked harvest for Tuanni for a season, and then I worked harvest in Napa, and it's such a great experience. It's so much work. There's more cleaning than there is winemaking, but you know.
Fact.
But
important clean.
Yeah, but I feel like it's a good way to like to get involved in the wine industry and to see like what you want. Like, I didn't do it. I did it, and I wasn't necessarily like, now I want to be a winemaker, but it did give me more behind the scenes and more appreciation for how a wine is made and how a wine is tastes. Like, I'm always giving these examples. I'm sorry. I was looking at a wine. I'm not going to say the winery's name, but I was looking at the wine, and we were online, and me and Monica looked at this wine because we were going to buy it, and it said 1,900 Rand. And I was like, that has to be a mistake. It has to be for a case, because that's not a 1,900 Rand wine. I've been and I worked harvest for a day. I know how they're making their wines, and that's not 1,900. That's not even 200 Rand a bottle. But you get to see why the prices are set the way that they are. I will show you a wine that I did make, just to show off a little bit, because I did work harvest this season.
Yay!
Nice.
And I make this wine, right? Now, when somebody says it's not worth the price, I can tell them for sure exactly why this wine is worth the price. Like, I mean, of course, it's a little bit of a name brand, but the work and the love and like that, it's handcrafted. Like, literally, my feet stomped the grapes that went into this wine. My hands picked each and every single berry. Like, not every single berry, but some of the berries.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's fantastic. Yeah, I can't recommend enough taking. I mean, obviously not everybody has the opportunity to like unplug from work and go and work harvest for 2 months, but I think it's probably one of the most invaluable experiences, regardless. Like, as you say, Tuanni, like, you might not necessarily want to go into winemaking, but working a harvest and seeing how the processes actually unfold makes you so much more knowledgeable just on the process as a whole. And whether you're a sommelier or you're going into sales or you're marketing the stuff, it's, yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. I think it's one of the best things you can do with wine.
And the weather's always quite nice at harvest time, so
added advantage, absolutely. Yeah, choose something pretty.
4 hours a day, but the weather's nice.
And I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like, wine generally tends to be made in some pretty darn pretty places. So it's inevitably, regardless of where you end up, it tends to be quite nice to soak up the surroundings too. Say again, sorry. Oh, sorry, I thought there was another question.
All right. Oh, sorry about that, you guys. Any more questions? No? All right. So, okay. Takeaways. Please don't forget to go to Yo El Rey Wines. Check out Angelo's story. If you have any feedback or if you want to ask him any questions, is it okay if I share your email, Angelo?
Please, yes, by all means, absolutely.
I will share his email. So if you have any questions that you didn't get to today, you can always ask him questions directly. And I feel like he's going to be here for us. He's super excited about our journey. So this probably won't be the last time that you're seeing him. And thank you so much for joining us. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge. I definitely appreciate it. I definitely have some key takeaways, and I'm going to share them with the rest of the group that wasn't here. And if you guys want to revisit this, I'm going to post this whole session on my YouTube channel. It'll be posted in a couple days or so. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Really, so honored to pop in today, and yeah, definitely won't be the last you see of this face for sure.
Yay! Thank you. I'm so glad to be back in season 2, and it went so well. Thanks, you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Angela.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tuanni. Bye.
Bye. You welcome.